Hello, Culture Matters podcast. We're back again with another culture topic. Follow if you follow me on Jay Doran or on Instagram at Jay Doran underscore the Culture Man. Culture topics we release consistently short videos on business, leadership, life, and a range of topics. Today I'm unpacking one of our culture topics, which was no titles policy. Story about Zappos and Anthony Hsieh. So here's some thoughts here about this Zappos no titles policy. Description is Tony Hsieh, former CEO of Zappos, introduced something called Holacracy, which was a system where job titles and traditional hierarchies were abolished. This tactic encouraged employees to work based on roles and responsibilities rather than formal positions. The idea was to foster collaboration and creativity. Anthony Hsieh's goal was to build a culture of empowerment where employees felt ownership and were aligned with the company's core values. Okay, so I have not studied deeply the history of Zappos, but the first thing that comes to mind is my curiosity would be I would almost bet that it was not that case in the beginning, or if it was small enough that that wasn't an issue because of the smaller the group, the less formality not matters, but manifests. The larger the group, the more likely that is to manifest, the more value formal positions have to create clarity. Now there are diminishing returns of that clarity, sure, or there could, but this this sounds like a bunch of hogwash, and this is why. So I'm going to read. So Anthony Hsieh, former CEO of Zappos, introduced Holacracy, a system where job titles and traditional hierarchy were abolished. This tactic encouraged employees to work based on roles and responsibilities rather than formal positions, fostering collaboration and creativity. That would foster more confusion and make things even more difficult. It's not the title and the position of someone that undermines their ability to act out the values. It's the title and the position that is meant to represent roles and responsibilities. It's meant to uh, make clear the who is the authority. That doesn't mean that authority, like, instead of having a higher call or a higher bar for those in position of authority to act out the values, we're just getting rid of all titles or getting rid of all positions. That would create confusion, and I don't think that would necessarily empower people. Um, these are some of my thoughts on that. Um, Changing the words can often lead to opposite behavior because of self-awareness. Yeah, if we change the words, we can actually convince ourselves that we've changed the behavior, and the behavior is not only the same but worse because it creates a blind spot. I see that happen often. That naturally manifests. I would be curious to know the history of Zappos, and I wonder if the holacracy could have came after the organization had grown beyond a smaller size, where the almost like if it started losing its spirit or losing its sense, the founder in that case came up with an idea to attempt to react or respond to things becoming more bureaucratic. But things could have become more bureaucratic as a consequence of that person's own blind spots in leadership, their own cult of personality that ended up manifesting into this ultimately this ideology where all of a sudden they're going to be the first to reinvent to reinvent how business works and how humans work. Because in any group of people, there's going to naturally manifest a hierarchy of value in the sense of those that demonstrate the most competence in certain domains will be seen as the people of authority, and the title reflects the the feeling, the group agreement, the permission of the general group to elevate an individual that's been recognized to best serve the group. Yes, people with not the highest competence of the group in a specific domain can be elevated to power. People can hack the system. People can, cheat the game, but that's not how the game works, because we don't want to play with people that cheat the game. We're not going to play multiple games with people that cheat the game. We're going to play multiple games with people that don't cheat the game, that cooperate, and at the same time demonstrate the highest value in their ability to act out roles or responsibilities. So I don't believe this strategy would be beneficial to a culture long term. I think it would create confusion and end up having a backwards effect on a culture. Now the spirit of, or the values of, our roles or responsibilities trump our title. That confers personal responsibility. It can lessen the negative consequence of the entitlement that comes with authority, influence, and power. Do as I say, not as I do. Rules for thee and not for me. But to get rid of titles, or no titles, and to make a claim for a holacracy, a religion of doing business, it could have long-term side effects that are actually antithetical to the idea of collaboration and creativity. Because changing the words doesn't necessarily change the behavior. It could actually increase the negative behavior as a consequence of thinking that we're different because we've changed the words. We're rationalizing, convincing ourselves of things that we're actually not doing. And that's something we always have to be careful of in groups, because that type of power that power stance, if things start going wrong and we're lying to ourselves, that's part of our working thesis, then the likelihood that those on the margin that can see the truth are either less likely to speak up or less likely to be heard when they do speak up. So changing the words can often lead to the opposite behavior because of self-awareness. It starts undermining self-awareness and creating groupthink, the yes person effect, and crucifying those on the margin that either won't tell the truth or do but won't be heard. We need to be careful to manipulate employees to feel ownership when they don't have ownership. So this idea of, where employees felt a culture of empowerment, where employees felt ownership and were aligned with the company's core values. What does feel ownership? I could have pride over the work that I do. I can identify with the significance and the purpose of the organization. The ownership that makes sense to have would be the ownership I have of my home, my personal balance sheet, how that's affected, impacted, short and long term by the organization's development, the organization's success. If I don't actually have ownership and I feel ownership, that's the road to manipulation. Now, if and there can be really negative side effects for the organization in that regard, because people could be programmed to either stop thinking or to think less. because factually they don't have ownership. Now, if the cat the now in some sense, if there's stock options, um, there's opportunity to have skin in the game, and there's actual equity ownership, that changes the conversation. Okay, we have ownership. We're a part of this organization. I think that's different than the feeling of ownership, but the absence of actual ownership. I think actual ownership and the feeling of ownership, if we're going to have a culture of ownership, like literal, where employees feel ownership, it would be best if they actually had it, so that there's they're less likely to be deceiving themselves of the facts, because that can also have a negative impact on their ability to think rationally and to perform, right? And which can sow the seeds of not speaking up, not thinking, not actually being as productive as one should be or could be. Now, the idea of a flat organization, that's more of a philosophical conversation. A core value conversation. For core values to actually be useful to an organization, not just a bunch of waste of time. They're beyond they're beyond the organization. The values transcend the titles. And so if the values are going to be useful, they transcend the titles. So the title is there to represent competence, to represent responsibility, an obligation of those in authority to those below. The values hold everyone to account. They're the means by which those with less authority, influence, and power can hold those above to account, because those above can read the values, think about the values, use the values as an anchor to their conscience. And those with less power, less authority, influence, they can hold those above them in authority to account, because the values supersede everyone. They're beyond the hierarchy. They're something everyone, even the CEO, is called to adhere to. Because if the CEO doesn't adhere to the values, they're demonstrating that uh, um, they're not modeling the identity of part of the identity of the organization, and they're sowing the seeds of dissent. They're if they're not modeling the values, then they're partially not doing their job, and people aren't going to take them as seriously. That's why the role of the CEO is so important. What worries me is when a founder like this starts changing the words and creating an internal religion, that can actually lead to really uh, uh, long-term negative side effects, because things start happening in vacuums. They start losing. They can easily lose sight of their own cult, their own behaviors, their own alignment to what they expect of others as a consequence of this ideology, and it ends up having a backwards effect on an organization. Um, Another thought is, I think this literature was a foreshadow. Yeah, so you know, it's if we actually follow the story, you know, it comes more across like I feel like almost bad saying this, but this the person that founded this organization, had some clear things that they were battling, and I don't think they won that battle. And to me, it's interesting to me that this ideology manifested itself in the organization that may or may not have been an effective tool to grow the business. My speculation is it was likely a later manifestation or a reaction to the loss of identity, or the anxiety that likely came with leading a much larger organization than there once was, and a psychological act of control as a reaction to the organization outgrowing their own ability to lead. And that was a foreshadow to some of the things that later on would happen in their life that would be really, really devastating to them and those close around them. I think they were probably an amazing person, somebody that people wanted to be around. So, and of course, like most great people, riddled with paradox and had their moments of embarrassment and shame, and but people probably loved them and were totally bought into them and their vision and the value that they created. And it takes a smart person and a unique person to come up with a whole new way of looking at all business and all things. And I definitely won't want this to come across as like an affront on the on Anthony Hsieh's story, spirit, what him and his coworkers created. But I don't think getting rid of titles is the answer. I guess that would be the simplest way to say it. It's that we want the titles, and we want to that instead of just getting rid of the titles, we have to embrace conflict with those that are not representing the titles. Like, we don't get rid of the presidency just because we we may have a couple in a row that don't do the best job possible in relation to the role. The role is the role. The title of president is a manifestation of things way beyond our cognitive reasoning. It's a part of our being. It's what it is what it's taken so many millennia to it's evolved. It's beyond us. So thinking that we could just throw things like that away and start afresh, I don't think that's the solution. It's a rational reaction to problems that we may not be able to address. So one way to address a corrupt dominance hierarchy where people are using authority over each other, and the title is slowing things down, is to get rid of the bad actors. It's to and so the people above them to do their job. Maybe this person that ran this organization did not like conflict. Maybe they didn't want to have those tough conversations. Remember, I'm just speculating. These are things that can manifest. Maybe as opposed to having those tough conversations, they came up with this idea that we're just going to get rid of all this that's probably influencing people to be that way. But that's actually not the solution. It's just actually having the tough conversations and getting the right people in the right positions that were fit to hold power, where their roles, their responsibility, and their ability to get things done matched or exceeded the role, the title that they actually that represented their value. Get the right person in the right seat, and people respect the titles. I want to respect the CEO. If I respect the CEO, they earn that title. The title's a signifier of competence, and it's a signifier of values. It's a signifier of respect and time put in, because like not everybody wants to put in the time or learn all the things to be to get to the next title, to get to the next level of authority, because they don't want that. They don't, and they haven't put in the work, and they haven't put in, and they don't have the as much value to the group as someone that has put in the work, or just has the value, or a combination. And so titles are like, they they're extremely, I mean, they wouldn't exist if they weren't necessary. The question is, how do we get the most out of them? Not necessarily get rid of them. We've seen this manifest throughout history with communes and all sorts of different ways that people have decided to govern themselves. And hey, if Charlie Munger said, if you never underestimate somebody that overestimates themselves. If you want to try it to run your organization with no titles, try it, see how it works. And hey, if you're the founder and you're all in and you do nothing else, and you're going to have a flock. Like, you're shepherding, you're going to have a flock. And that's most of the battle. It's if you're an engaged leader that's all in on your idea, and you're willing to take the risk and bring people into it and treat them, and they're willing to stay with you, like that's, you know, you know, all power to you. But be careful. when staring into the abyss doesn't stare back into you. My last one thought I wrote down here is titles should reflect roles, responsibility, and action. When they don't, you fire people. You don't or graduate. You don't avoid that conflict and change the language and create a religion or something that could be close to a religion. No. And now, if we are holding people to account, you know, grow or go, and they are living to the highest of what that title represents, my belief is that people will respect them and the title in turn. It's part of the gamification of the human condition. Getting rid of the title isn't going to change human nature. If anything, it could create more confusion and resentment and disorder, which would lead to chaos. And ultimately, I'd love, that would be my final thoughts on that. Is that it was my speculation would be that it was likely a later manifestation. If it was in the beginning, he could have gotten away with it because it's small enough for the cult of personality of the founder to influence people to actually just be responsible, whether they have title or not. Their responsibility, their acting and values transcends titles anyway. Or if it could have been a reaction as things got bigger and this cult of personality founder was unable to, was losing a sense of their own identity as a consequence of the identity of the organization evolving and things becoming more bureaucratic as a consequence of their own avoidance of conflict of the tougher conversations. They could have easily wanted to get rid of the titles, get rid of things to make things, more fluid and productive and purpose driven. And I could be completely wrong about all of this, and it could have worked absolutely amazingly for a period of time. And I'd love to hear feedback on that. This is a continued topic. I'm going to do more research and come back on another Culture Matters podcast. But follow me on Instagram, Jay Doran _ the Culture Man. No titles policy, Zappos. Please leave us a review of the Culture Matters podcast. I will see you next time.